Okay, there we go. So thank you guys very much for hopping in. My name is Matthew Pfeiffer. I'm a therapist, coach, author. I wrote the book, Oh Shit, I Think They're a Fucking Narcissist. So as you're hopping in, let me know where you guys are located at. Let me know where you guys are from. And today we're going to be talking about things that narcissists are afraid of. So let me know down below where you are located at. Let me know where you are from. And we will get things going. So thank you guys very much for hopping in. Sorry that I had to end the live and then start it back up. But as you're hopping in, let me know where you guys are located at. Let me know where you guys are from. So for those of you who are new to me, I help people who are in unhealthy relationships. I help people heal from toxic relationships. Help people move on, move their life forward. So let me know down below. Make sure you put your questions into the comment section down below. And today we are going to be talking about we're going to be talking about things that narcissists are afraid of. Oftentimes we talk about narcissism, we talk about, we always talk about like not attracting them, but a lot of times we forget that narcissists have things that they are afraid of. They have things that, and sometimes that also causes a lot of the issues that you experience with them. It causes a lot of the problems that you experience with them. And so I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you. So we've had a great couple of weeks in terms of our lives. Last week we talked about a lot of attachment type of stuff. We talked about anxious attachment, avoidant attachment. We talked about trauma bonds last week. We talked about signs that someone is being manipulative. We talked about love bombing last week as well. This week we talked about what did we talk about this week? I'm already forgetting. We talked about trust issues yesterday. We talked about dealing with trust issues. I think we talked about love bombing again as well. So we've had a great set of lives these last couple of weeks. If you want to watch the replay, if you come up here to the link in my bio, if you go to the big red play button, if you guys know what I'm talking about, I always talk in code. The big red play button is the social media channel that rhymes with Bluetooth. I'm trying to not say it because TikTok will suppress the live. So as you're hopping in, let me know. Also, give me a high five if you're a regular here. Give me a number 1 if you are new to my live, if you've never been a part of my live before. And if you are new, we talk a lot about relationships, healing from relationships, moving on, moving forward. Oftentimes, people experience a toxic relationship and then find themselves stuck in certain situations and certain dynamics and unable to move their life forward. So Carlina, thank you very much for being here. Mimi, and also thank you very much for the follow. Also, for those of you who are considering working with me, if you come up here to the link in my bio, we can book a free consultation. I do have availability tomorrow to meet, so make sure you take full advantage of that. It's a free 20-minute phone call. We'll talk about what my programs entail, what that looks like, why they work out so well, why they've worked out so well for people over the last decade. And we can go from there. So thank you guys very much. Once again, as always, make sure you guys put your questions into the comment section down below. And we're going to be talking about things that narcissists are afraid of. How many of you have ever wondered this, right? Give me a high five. If you have ever wondered, right? Well, first of all, give me a high five if you have ever experienced, if you've ever dated, if you've ever been romantically involved with someone who was narcissistic, right? Maybe they weren't completely narcissistic, but maybe they were pretty high on that spectrum. Give me a high five down below in the comment section. So I see Carlina, I see people hopping in. Most people who follow me have probably experienced it at some level or another, either through a romantic partner or a family member. And so how many of you have actually wondered what narcissists are afraid of? Maybe not so much in the terms of what they're afraid of, but what are their weaknesses? Because oftentimes this is something that a lot of times people think about, especially people who have been a victim of narcissistic abuse, because the way that they present, and when you're in a relationship with them, it seems like, and sometimes it can come across as though they have no weakness, and because they've had so much power over you for so long, oftentimes it feels like they're just on this pedestal, and sometimes they'll even present like that. But something that I've told people and something that I've taught a lot in my lives is that narcissists are actually very, extremely insecure, right? And so there's a handful of things that they are actually very, very afraid of. Tam said, no, that's not your name. Said that she was married to one for 12 years. That is the for a lot of people, they do end up staying with them for a long, long period of time. So we're going to be talking about 8 things that narcissists are afraid of, and some of them might actually surprise you, right? So number 1 might actually surprise you because most of you have been involved, and not only are narcissists afraid of this, but they actually look for it, right? So they look for this, but they're also, and you're going to notice this link with a lot of these fears that I'm talking about, is that they look for it, they desire it, they try to get some of these things from you. They'll present like they want it, but they also are afraid of it, and this is kind of that duality that oftentimes you see with narcissists. So number 1, narcissists are afraid of commitment in relationships. So a lot of you, like when I say that, people are like, but Matt, I was married to a narcissist for 12 years. I was married to a narcissist for 25 years. I was married to a narcissist that I worked with someone who was married to a narcissist for 40 years. So how could they be afraid of commitment in relationships? Well, what do healthy, keyword healthy, relationships require? They require vulnerability. So narcissists aren't afraid of the image of commitment relationships. They're not necessarily afraid of showing off the fact that they are married or with you or with somebody else or presenting that on social media. But one of the things that you'll notice is that behind the scenes it's a very different story, which is the experience that most of you have had when you're with someone who's narcissistic, is that they'll present as though everything is perfectly fine, so they have no problem committing to a relationship for the image and for the aesthetics. But behind the scenes, in terms of the responsibilities that people might have in terms of a relationship, completely different, right? How many of you were with a narcissist over a decade, maybe 2 decades, 3 decades, and noticed that that person never really opened up, right? Oftentimes because they didn't want to do exactly what you wanted to do, which is what they didn't want you to do to them what they probably did to you, which was exploitation. So number 1, narcissists are afraid of commitment in relationships. One of the biggest fears narcissists have is committing to a relationship. They keep their guard up and rarely show their true selves. Real relationships demand vulnerability. I'm going to say that again. Real relationships demand vulnerability, which can expose their insecurities, which is what narcissists don't want. Narcissists may worry that if they get too close, their partner will uncover their hidden fears and secrets, which is exactly what they do to you. Oftentimes, narcissists, their real fear is that someone is going to do to them exactly what they are doing to you. Now, I'm not telling you these things to try to do these, to try to get your get back and things like that. That won't work, right? And we're going to talk about the reasons why those things won't work. But I do think that it's also important for you to see these dynamics so then you can understand what you are going through if you're still in that relationship and what you went through if you're out of that relationship. I'm going to go through probably the next 2 slides and then I'm going to get into some questions. So make sure you guys put your questions down into the Q&A box down below. Also, for those of you who want to work with me, I do have sessions available tomorrow. I do have consultations available tomorrow. We can hop on a 20-minute call. I'll talk to you about what it's like to work with me. Also, if you want the replay of this live or any other lives that I've done, they're available on the big red play button. I'm talking in code. That is the channel that rhymes with BlueTube, so you can watch the upload of this and other things. Also, for those of you who follow me for a while, I'm back to answering questions that you have on that channel as well. So send me your questions to justaskmatt@mattpfeiffercoaching.com. Keep the email 2 to 3 paragraphs max. Be very direct and to the point of what your question actually is. If I don't understand what you're asking, I won't be able to answer it. So number 2, the second thing that narcissists are afraid of is self-reflection. Self-reflection. So one of the things that narcissists don't do is that you'll notice that they have a significant lack of self-awareness. And oftentimes the reason why they do is it has to do with their own insecurities, their own shame. They don't want to go in. They would much rather stay very, very surface level, even when it comes to the relationship that they have with themselves. Narcissists are often in denial about who they really actually are. So it's not them just denying it to you. They're also in denial about it to themselves. Facing the truth about themselves is something they are afraid of, that they are afraid to avoid. Facing the truth about themselves is something that they avoid at all costs. They prefer to believe that they're flawless, right? How many of you experience this? They want to believe that they are flawless. And fear that deep self-examination could reveal uncomfortable truths that they don't want to confront. How many of you tried to get your person, the narcissistic person, to go to therapy, and you couldn't figure out why they would never go to therapy, and even if they did, they only stayed for 1 or 2 sessions and then they bounced? Right? How many of you have had that experience? How many of you had that experience that when you went to couples therapy with them? Right? They may have gone to therapy, but it didn't last. It lasted maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks max. And the minute that thing started to get a little heated on their ends, when there needed to be some self-reflection on their end, all of a sudden, it was done. Oh, I know more than the therapist. They don't know what they're talking about, right? As soon as it got uncomfortable, as soon as that heat got turned up a little bit, when it required self-reflection on their end, all of a sudden, they're out. Now you're probably starting to understand why, right? So narcissists, even though on the surface look like that they love and cherish themselves and things like that, it couldn't be any further from the truth. A lot of times people have this misconception that narcissists love themselves too much, and it's actually self-hate that they're actually dealing with. It's insecurities that they're truly dealing with, and they present as though everything is okay on the surface, and it's not. Number 3, insults. The third thing that narcissists are afraid of are insults. Although narcissists are quick to criticize others, they are extremely sensitive to any criticism directed at them. How many of you, when a narcissist joked with you, it was one thing, but then when you gave it back to them, completely different scenario, right? How many of you, when the narcissist had a criticism for you, maybe you did this in therapy, maybe you did this, the two of you by yourself, they gave you some feedback about your relationship, but the minute that you had feedback for them, how many of you experienced managing, right? Being the manager of a narcissist, and God forbid, right, your yearly review or quarterly review comes up, you give them feedback, and what was it met with? It was probably met with some significant explosion. Although narcissists are quick to criticize others, right? So they will be very quick to criticize you, right? But on the other hand, they don't want the criticism, because what happens if there's, and let's talk about constructive criticism. Let's not talk about like the deep criticism where you're actually being critical of somebody else. When you're talking about, even with constructive criticism, this requires self-reflection on their end. It requires for someone to open up and be open to the fact that they do have flaws, which we just mentioned that narcissists try to act like they don't have any flaws, right? So that becomes a huge problem. So I'm going to answer some questions. I see some questions flying in down below, so make sure you put your questions down below. I'll try to get to as many, if not all of them. I'm going to take some questions here. When we come back, we're going to talk about how narcissists are afraid of shame. So the first 3 was they're afraid of commitment in relationships, not for the reasons why you think, but because real relationships require vulnerability, so they're afraid of the vulnerability piece. Number 2, narcissists are afraid of self-reflection, because that means they have to be open to the fact that they have flaws, and they don't want to acknowledge that they have flaws, or they have insecurity or deep-rooted shame. Number 3, narcissists are afraid of insults, and then when we come back, we're going to be talking about how narcissists are afraid of shame. So with all that being said, if you want to work with me, you can come up here and link in my bio. If you're struggling with any of these, if you're struggling with recovering from narcissistic abuse or dealing with something like that, if you're continuously running into narcissists on the dating scene, things like that, make sure you book a free consultation. It'll be a 20-minute phone call. We'll talk about what it would be like for us to work together. Also, make sure you are watching the replays of these lives on the big red play button. I'm also putting up a lot of different type of content on the big red play button. If you're new here, I'm talking in code. The big red play button is a social media page that rhymes with BlueTube, if you know what I mean. TikTok suppresses. TikTok sometimes can be a little bit narcissistic and thinks that you can only be on one platform, and they get insecure about you being on other platforms, so they suppress the lives whenever you mention any other platform. So follow me over there. Check that out. I put the replays of these lives. I also answer people's questions over there. So if you have a question that you want to ask me that needs more detail than what you can put into the comment section, send it over to justaskmatt@mattpfeiffercoaching.com. Again, that is justaskmatt@mattpfeiffercoaching.com. Keep the email 2 to 3 paragraphs max. Be very direct and to the point of what your question actually is. If I don't understand what you're asking, if I don't understand what's being said, unfortunately, I will not be able to get to it. A couple other things. Don't ask me to just respond back to an email. It's going to be on video, right? If you don't want to be on video, it's just not the right thing for you. So let's get into some of these questions. How do you know if you're a narcissist? So a lot of people will say if you ask that, then you're not a narcissist. But what I will say is that if you're asking that, there's a good chance that you might be doing some things that are narcissistic, right? So you might be seeing and you might be hearing some things that are narcissistic. Now, here's the reason why that might be happening to you. The reason why that might be happening to you is that what a lot of people don't talk about, and the reason why, I don't know why, but people just on social media, maybe because of pandering, maybe because they genuinely don't know, but unhealed trauma can look like narcissism when you don't know what you're doing, right? And so if there's not, the fact that you're asking the question shows that you are self-reflecting enough to know that there's some things there, right? There's some things that need to be corrected, which is fine, right? That doesn't make you a bad person or anything like that. It just means that we got some work to do. So number one, go to therapy, right? So go to therapy, talk to them about some of the things that are happening. I've worked with people before who thought this about themselves, and they're like, I do this, I do that, I do that. And what ends up happening is that a lot of times it's not narcissism, it's codependency. So a lot of people make it seem like codependency is the opposite of narcissism when it's actually the other side of the coin, where they have unhealed trauma, they have deep-rooted insecurities, they have all of it, but they're not narcissists. So number one, go to therapy, be self-reflective be open to the fact that some of the things that you've experienced in the past may have led and may have taught you to be the way that you are, right? And understand that not only are you going to feel better when you do the work, but you're also going to have better relationships through that process as well. Great question. He always complained about his boss because of constructive criticism. You'll hear that a lot. And sometimes when they go to work and they get constructive criticism, they'll come back to you and you end up being the unfortunately the receiving end of that criticism that they experience. Living with one now, can't get out because of financial abuse. It cost $5,000 for a contested divorce. I am so sorry. There's always a way out, but I'm not gonna lie and say that that's not difficult. One of the things I do tell people is that there's always a way out. It may not be the way that you want, may not be convenient, but there's always a way out. So don't give up hope. Please help. How do I co-parent with him? So a lot of people ask me about co-parenting, and I literally have. I've worked with people for over a decade with co-parenting with narcissists. So every single situation is going to be different. So when for those of you who ask me questions, give me a little bit more specific, because I can go down a rabbit hole of how to exchange with narcissists. And maybe your problem isn't exchanging. Maybe your problem is texting, right? Communicating. Maybe they're making maybe they're making threats. Maybe there's a lot of different issues. Maybe they're forcing you to have holidays and birthdays with them. So So I need a little bit more context. Also, for those of you who are struggling in a high conflict divorce or high conflict co-parenting situation like this, you can book a free consultation, and we can see if it's a good opportunity for us to work together on some of those things as well. Deep shame. Mine told me way back when that their therapist was an idiot. That happens all the time. So they'll, typically within 2 to 3 sessions, their therapist is an idiot. I know more than they do. I should be the therapist, not them. Like, you'll hear all those sorts of things. Anything except for actually opening up. I just got hoovered after 5 years. Yep, it can happen. How did they even think that they're flawless? So it became like more of a defensive mechanism, right? So it's not that they actually think that they're flawless a lot of times. It's actually like a presentation. Narcissists internally don't necessarily feel these things. He was covert. Covert narcissists can be very, very difficult because they present very differently. If you are dealing with a covert narcissist, then I would definitely read the book. I forgot the name of the book, but it'll come to me as the live goes on. My ex left me for a girl I know and still calls and texts every day. I can't. If I had $1 for every time I heard that story, because it's like they can move on, but they don't want you to move on all at the same time. Difference between dismissive avoidant and narcissist. So dismissive avoidants are self-sabotaging, right? So when they are criticizing and things like that, they're self-sabotaging because avoidants actually want to be in a relationship. They really actually do. But they also are afraid of experiencing what they experienced in the past. So so you have to understand that avoidance, people who are avoidant and people who are anxious, attached, they actually have the same level of anxiety about relationships. They react to them very differently. So someone who is anxiously attached are clinging because they have a deep fear of abandonment and being rejected. Whereas dismissive avoidants oftentimes are afraid of people getting too close and them not being able to, at some point in time, someone clinged on to them too much. So their defense mechanism is to be dismissive towards someone and to criticize to try to get that space. And oftentimes sometimes they really just don't, they honestly just don't realize that they're doing this, right? But they're doing it in a way to try to keep themselves safe, right? To try to protect themselves. And oftentimes, like with a dismissive avoidant, they will be open to, not saying every time, right? A lot of times, and not just avoidance, but also this also can be with this is true of anyone, right? Some people just aren't ready to accept, to be open to change and things like that, because change is difficult for anyone, right? Let alone people who are dealing with unhealed trauma. So I talked about avoidance last Tuesday, so that should be up on my big red play button here probably within the next couple of days, because I'm behind in terms of uploading my content. All right, let's get back into this. I will get back to some questions. Also, don't forget, if you want to email me, if you have questions that need more nuance, or you would like to give me more nuance, and I can give you a complete video response, you can email me, justaskmatt@mattpfeiffercoaching.com. Again, that is justaskmatt@mattpfeiffercoaching.com. Give me several days to get back to you. Make sure you're checking the channel for your response, because that's where it will be. You'll get an automated response to let you know that I got your email. Keep the email 2 to 3 paragraphs max. Be very direct and to the point of what your question actually is. If it's too long, if it's too lengthy, or if I don't understand what you're asking, unfortunately, I won't be able to get to it. So, and then also don't forget, I'm available for a free consultation. I do have availability tomorrow if you guys need it. So let's get back into this. So number 1 is commitment in relationships. Second thing that narcissists are afraid of is self-reflection, right? They don't like to look inward to see some of the issues and some of the flaws that they actually have. Number 3 is insults. So it's completely okay for them to insult you, but they definitely don't want insults back. And that also sometimes includes jokes as well. Number 4, which we're going to go through right now, is shame. So I posted a video of Dr. Romney with her interview with Jay Shetty, and she talked about this at length. Talked about how narcissists are like a volcano that are just about ready to erupt with shame. So we have to understand, one of the things that when people who have worked with me will tell you, that I tell people all the time, that your emotions don't go anywhere. They don't go anywhere. I'm not talking about just the good ones, but the ones that don't feel good either. I don't believe in good or bad emotions. They're all just emotions. But shame, guilt, happiness, sadness, depression, all of it. When you don't deal with it, it all just gets built up. So with narcissists, they have deep-rooted shame, some from childhood, some from things that they've dealt with as an adult. And because they're not dealing with it, it starts to boil over and oftentimes gets projected onto, think of like slime or gunk, like, that's just getting like tossed everywhere, right? So narcissists have this fear of shame, and instead of letting it out the way that they really should, they suppress it, and then it comes out in little spurts, onto other people. Narcissists dread experiencing shame. It's important to note that they don't fear guilt in the same way. They are more concerned with being judged negatively by others or losing their place in the social hierarchy rather than feeling guilty about harming someone else's feelings. So, let's talk about it, right? There's a difference between guilt and shame. And this is the reason why when you experienced something from a narcissist, they didn't act or feel bad for what they did. What did they do? Well, you deserved it. If you didn't do this, I wouldn't have done that. So they don't feel guilty necessarily for the things that they do to other people. But God forbid you tell the therapist or tell someone else what they did, and then they can experience shame from people who are on the outside of this relationship. How many of you have experienced this, right? How many of you have asked this and have wondered, like, well, do they even, people ask me all the time, do they even know what they're doing, right? And this tells you that they know what they're doing, right? That the fact that they can tell you that, you pushed me to do this, but they also know that it's bad because they don't want anyone else to know. I can't believe you told so-and-so, blah, blah. And then oftentimes this is met with a level of gaslighting, right? I can't believe that you told so-and-so about what I did, about what I did. It didn't even happen like that. You're over-exaggerating. You're over, and then they try to downplay because they want that shame that they're feeling to subside. But they don't feel guilty necessarily, right? They might say it, especially if they're feeling, so two completely different things. Actually feeling guilty, or, if they're trying to subside like the shame that they're feeling, they might actually say like, oh, I feel so guilty about this, or blah, 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 right? And on the public forum to try to minimize the shame that they're feeling. But do they actually feel guilty to the person that they actually did it to? Two completely different things, right? And this sometimes for people who are actually in it is where some of that confusion comes in. Because you're sitting here watching this person say and do all the right things on one end, but then your experience with them internally is completely different. So that's number 4. So number 1 is commitment in relationships. Number 2, self-reflection. Number 3 is insults. Number 4 is shame. The 5th thing that narcissists are afraid of is lack of admiration. Lack of admiration. Much like performers, narcissists thrive on attention and validation. What do we call that? We call that narcissistic supply. One of their greatest fears is that their efforts to impress others will be ignored, right? This is the reason why I tell people that the biggest get back that you can give to a narcissist is going no contact. While some people are content with being unnoticed, narcissists need constant admiration and recognition. So let's talk about what that looks like in relationships. How many of you, and it's actually happened since we've been on live, have wondered, they have a girlfriend, they have a boyfriend, why are they still coming back after me? And a lot of it has to do with this, lack of admiration, right? if they're with this new person, why are they still calling me? Why are they still? Because they need excessive admiration, right? Even if they're with, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to leave the other person. Doesn't necessarily mean that they want to come back, but they do at times want to feel like you still want them back, and they still want the admiration that you potentially are giving them. Also, on the flip side, the fear of that, the fear of you going no contact, right? And this is the reason why I tell people the best revenge that you can get from a narcissist is to go no contact, for you to move on and for you to heal and act like they, not even act like, but get to a point where they're just like a insignificant person that you have dealt with at some point in time in your life, and that is possible. Hello, Alicia. Good seeing you in here. Thank you very much for hopping in. We'll have to talk about some shame and things like that as well once you get settled in. So let's talk about the 5 things, and then I'm going to take a break, pause for some questions. So number 1 thing that narcissists are afraid of are commitment in relationships. Number 2 is self-reflection. Number 3 are insults. Number 4 is shame. We just went through number 5, a lack of admiration. So thank you guys very much for the follows. I appreciate it. So when we come back, we're going to be talking about how narcissists are afraid of being exposed. They're afraid of being exposed. So put your questions down below. Make sure also, if you guys are struggling with anything like this, I do have free consultations available. I do have availability tomorrow. I think I have 3 or 4 slots available tomorrow. So make sure you guys take full advantage of that. It'll be a free 20-minute call. And I'll talk to you about what it's like for us to work together, for you to see if it is something that you would like to move forward with. Also, if you want to watch the replay of this live or any other content that I put out, make sure you are checking me out on the big red play button. I'm talking in code because TikTok sometimes can be narcissistic. They get insecure when you talk about other platforms, and they suppress your lives and your videos. So big red play button rhymes with Bluetooth. So make sure you're checking me out over there. I also answer people's questions over there as well. So email me your questions, where you can give me a lot more nuance about your situation. Keep the email 2 to 3 paragraphs max. Be very direct and to the point of what your question actually is. If it's too long, if it's too lengthy, or if I don't understand what you're asking, unfortunately, I will not be able to answer it. But with all that being said, let's get into some of these questions. So what if you can't afford therapy? If you can't afford therapy, you need to read books. When I say read books, it can be through Audible. You can listen to books. You can listen to Audible. You can do things like this, getting involved in different communities. There's a lot of different free communities. I have an online community, Facebook community. Make sure there's nothing wrong with getting involved in an online community, but I also would tell you to also get involved in like real life physical community, whether that is like at your church, things like that. But you definitely want to do things like this, where you're listening and learning about different things, reading about different things, and until you can afford therapy. And then also see if there is something available that is more affordable, right? So I'm a partner with BetterHelp. I want to be very clear, because people ask me this all the time. I don't work for BetterHelp. I'm a partner of theirs. So you won't be getting me, and you can't request me or anything like that. But you will get 15% off your first month. So that might be, I do know that they have different levels and different ways to make it more affordable. So you can check that out. And so I would do some of those things. I believe I have some books in my TikTok shop. So you can check that and check those things out. I'm always making book recommendations. One of the very first books I tell people to read is so there's Body Keeps Score, but also can't believe I just lost track of that. This is like one of my favorite books. I'll come back to that here in a second. Is it true that narcissists can make you become ill? 100% true. Not only is it. I actually did a video about this not too long ago. So make sure you go check that out. Not only is it possible, it's like that's what's going to happen. It's not only will you become ill, it's like it's part of. So you have to understand that toxic relationships, not just narcissistic relationships, are literally poison to the body. Literally, I'm not saying like they're just like it. Like I mean, they are poisonous to your body, right? So people who follow me for a while will tell you that I talk about how narcissistic relationships and toxic relationships are very addicting. Well, guess what? When you're struggling with a real life addiction, for those of you who don't know, I used to be a substance use therapist, so I'm not saying this lightly. But you're literally injecting poison to your body when you are struggling with an addiction. But what a lot of people don't know is that when you're with a narcissist, it's literally the same part of the brain that functions with addiction as well. And so what happens is that cortisol starts pumping through your body because your body, even though read the body keeps score, and you'll understand this a little bit more, your body knows that you shouldn't be in this relationship, and so it starts pumping cortisol all throughout your body to try to get you to leave. This is the walking on eggshells feeling that a lot of people feel, right? It's cognitive dissonance where a part of you is addicted and feels like you're in love and wants to stay, and another part of you knows that you need to get the hell out of there, right? So your body starts pumping cortisol all throughout your body to try to initiate you to leave, and the longer that you stay, you're actually causing yourself literally, I'm not saying this like lightly, an early death, right? So a lot of people start losing hair, weight gain, sometimes extreme weight loss. You can listen to a podcast I did with Dr. Sky about how you can develop fibromyalgia, a lot of gut issues. It can exacerbate autoimmune issues as well. If you already have issues, it can exacerbate those things as well. So not only can it, but that's what happens, right? That's a part of the reason why people like myself do the things that I do, because it's, like I said, it's not, it could, that's what's going to happen. Thank you guys very much for the follows. Hair loss for me, healing now. Oh my God, that's not good. I don't need this. I'm learning all this now. Yep, that's the reason why we do this. They call so many medical issues your body can break down and die out. Yep, they definitely cause a lot of different issues. All right, it's the reason why people say trust your gut. Right, I need a consultation ASAP. Consultations are available. We do have free consultations. I do have availability as early as tomorrow. I might have a couple of cancellations today. So if you do have availability today, DM me and I might be able to get you in today. But I definitely have consultations available tomorrow. So make sure you guys check the link in my bio, fill out the application, and then we'll go from there. So let's get back into this. So number one is, so we're talking about things that narcissists are afraid of. Number one thing that they're afraid of is commitment in relationships. Number two is self-reflection. Number three is insults. Number four is shame. Number five is lack of admiration. And we're now on number six, which is being exposed. And I want you guys to kind of notice this pattern that we're talking about, right? Notice the things that they are afraid of, they also do. So on one end, they're afraid of being exposed, but what is it that they do to you? They get a lot of your vulnerabilities, pick up a lot of your vulnerabilities, and when you don't do the things that they want you to, right? Expose it on social media, expose it to your work, expose it to here, expose it there, right? When we talk about revenge, PORN, right? Things like that, exposing you in those ways. So on one end, they're afraid of it, but on the other end, they use it as a lot of their tactics. And so you can kind of see the mind of a narcissist and how it works, like the things that I'm afraid of that they also do to people. Narcissists often find themselves entangled in lies, whether it's exaggerated, whether it's to exaggerate their achievements or manipulative. Let me reread that. I messed up. Whether it's to exaggerate their achievements or to manipulate others. Although lying can help them achieve their goals, they live with the fear of being exposed and having their dishonest behavior called out. And don't forget, this kind of goes hand in hand with another fear that they have that we talked about earlier. They have this deep-rooted fear of shame. Right? So if they're doing, so for people who don't struggle with narcissism, things like that, it's like, well, if you struggle with shame, if you have this deep-rooted fear of shame, stop doing bad things, right? But you have to understand that it all comes back down to their number one fear, right? Of that, that they want people to believe that they're flawless, and they don't want to be vulnerable with people and things like that. So they're covering it up with, and they're masking it with all these lies and manipulation and deceit and things like that. But they also, so now you can see where why. So imagine like living like this, right? You can see how confusing this would be if this was you trying to cover up, trying to mask lies, trying to mask shame, all this kind of stuff. And then we wonder why it's so confusing when you're actually with a narcissist, where on one end it seems like they are very loving and things like that, and then they mistreat you, then they're lying to you, and then they have to lie to other people, and then to try to keep up with all this because you don't want to get exposed. You can see how all of a sudden this comes full circle. So that was number 6, is being exposed. Number 1 is commitment in relationships. Number 2 is self-reflection. Number 3 is insults. Number 4 is shame. Number 5 is lack of admiration. Number 6 is being exposed. And then we're about to go through number 7. As strange as this sounds, narcissists are afraid of gratitude. They're afraid of gratitude. Expressing gratitude is something narcissists struggle with. How many of you, pay attention, right? How many of you have noticed that your narcissist, I'm not going to say never, but hardly ever say thank you? Hardly ever express gratitude towards people, right? It's something that's not talked about much, about how, and we're going to talk about the reasons why here in a second. But we have to understand that saying thank you signifies dependence. Narcissists don't want to be dependent, or they at least they'll be dependent, but they don't want you to think that they're dependent on you, right? But thank you signifies dependence on someone else, right? It shows vulnerability. And remember, what's one of the things that narcissists are trying to cover? Vulnerability. So they, like I said, I don't like being black and white and saying that they'll never say thank you, but it's hardly ever will say thank you, because they don't want you to understand, to realize that they're dependent on you or that they're vulnerable in that area. So saying thank you signifies dependence on someone else, and narcissists are unwilling to admit that they need help from anyone. This inability to show gratitude is likely rooted to their fear of vulnerability, right? So we talked about this in slide 1, where they have a deep-rooted fear of committed relationships, because even though they'll be committed in a relationship, they don't want to be vulnerable in that relationship because they don't want to be over-reliant, and they also don't want to have for you to have the opportunity to expose them or to have anything that's hanging over their head. Right? So number 7 is gratitude. We're going to go through number 8. This will be our last slide, and then I'm going to take some questions. So make sure you put your questions down into the comment section down below. So let's go and get a quick run through. So these are the things that narcissists are afraid of. Number 1 is commitment in relationships. Number 2 is self-reflection. Number 3 is insults. Number 4 is shame. Number 5 is admiration. Number 6 is being exposed. Number 7 is gratitude. And number 8, something I think we can all relate to, but it's not for the reasons why you think. Narcissists are afraid of death, right? Narcissists are afraid of death. I think that a lot of people can relate there. However, once again, it's not for the reasons why you think. Many narcissists see themselves as invincible, right? Godlike. Almost like God, almost godlike, believing they are immune to misfortune. They're immune to bad things happening to them. Remember, nothing is their fault. Nothing is my fault. However, deep down, they are terrified of death, knowing that even the most powerful individuals cannot escape it. So one of the things that narcissists think or try to do is they spend their life trying to be a step above everybody else. But the one thing that they can't escape is death, right? So it's, once again, it's not for the reasons why you think. However, they are afraid of that. And I would add on to, it kind of goes hand in hand, they're also afraid of aging. So when we talk about aging, that also means that they're getting one step closer to what? Death. But also they don't like experiencing aging. And for the ladies who've experienced narcissistic mothers, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Because if there's any type of person who experiences this and sees this, it's daughters of narcissistic mothers. The reason why I say that is that those books that Disney wrote in terms of like, you know, who's the fairest of them all and all that kind of stuff, like those came from books that actually were written about like narcissistic women, narcissistic mothers towards their daughters and sometimes stepdaughters, right? And what happens with narcissistic mothers when they have a daughter who starts to come into their own, starts to develop and things like that, and they see that daughter's youth and they start to look in the mirror and they start to see themselves aging, oftentimes that can come with a lot of abuse. It can come with, it can go either way. On one end of the spectrum, it can come with a lot of abuse. On the other end of the spectrum, all of a sudden they become your best friend, where all of a sudden they're not a parent. It's like they're your best friend to a point, but to a point where it's not a healthy like friendship. Like it's like they're flirting with your boyfriend, they're flirting with your husband to try to recapture that youth. They're trying to take over your friend group, right? Trying to push you out of the friend group and take over your friend group and things like that, where it's not really a healthy dynamic. So, Jimmy said, all that's on the dot. Those things can happen with, so male narcissists present very differently, but most people kind of talk, we over talk about male narcissists, but we don't talk hardly about women who are narcissistic. So let's get into some questions. So that is the 8 things narcissists are afraid of. I guess we can throw in 9 because we just talked about aging as well. For those of you who want to work with me, or if you're considering work with me, make sure you book a free consultation. I do have consultations that are available as early as tomorrow. We can talk about what it would be like for us to work together, what that would look like, why people I work with are so successful. Also, you can make sure you follow me on the big red play button if you want to watch the replay of this live or any other lives that I do. Whenever I say the big red play button, I'm talking in code. I'm talking about the page, the channel that rhymes with BlueTube. TikTok can be a bit narcissistic and they get insecure about you talking about other platforms and things like that, and so they suppress the lives and suppress your videos when you do that. So make sure you check me out over there. I also put out other content. I also answer your questions over there. So send me an email at justaskmatt@mattpfeiffercoaching.com. Again, that is justaskmatt@mattpfeiffercoaching.com. And keep that email 2 to 3 paragraphs max. Tell me a little bit about your situation. I'll answer it in a video on YouTube. I will, but if I don't understand what you're asking, or if it's too long, if it's too lengthy, I won't be able to answer that. So with all that being said, let's get into some questions. Can a narcissist change? So the answer to that is a very, very quick no. And it's not even so much that so I don't like saying whether they can or can't. It's more about, do they want to or will they? So the answer to that is no, because of all the things. So think about some of the things that we just talked about today and what it requires. It requires vulnerability. It requires for them to be open. It requires for them to go into their deep-rooted insecurities that we just talked about. It requires for them to expose themselves. It requires for them to be thankful and to have gratitude towards others. So you're asking someone to go into the very thing that they are afraid of the most to change. So even if they do start that process, the likelihood of them continuing down that process is very, very minimal. The other issue with this is, like, let's forget about narcissism, right? Let's just talk about change, period, from anyone, anybody, right? How many of you stuck with your New Year's resolutions? How many of you stuck with that diet? How many of you stuck with your workout routines? How many of you, period, right? How many of you stuck with reading a book a week? Or how many of you stuck with the things that you said that you wanted to do? Change for anybody is difficult But then when you add on top of that there's some sort of disorder that tells you that you don't need change, imagine how much more difficult that is. So this is the reason why I just tell people no. Because the other reason why I tell people no is that oftentimes when people ask this, the person who's asking, a lot of times you also need changing as well. Right? We have to understand that relationships are like the little baby, little toy that hangs over a baby's crib. When you pull and tug on one toy, it has an impact on others. So even if a narcissist was to change, that would require change on your end as well. So there's also change that needs to happen on your end. Ex-narcissist is remarried, still trying to trigger me. I left him years ago. If you can, go no contact. I understand if you have children, but if you have children, it should be very, very minimal contact. My ex was best friends with his mom, but she abandoned him in childhood several times. Seems backwards. So it doesn't seem backwards to me. So a lot of times what happens is that they are trying to prove that they are worthy to that person, right? To the person that abandoned them, and trying to prove that they are worth keeping instead of abandoned. So it comes from a deep-rooted fear of abandonment. Talked about that. A woman that was a friend for like 8 years. Now she's showing avoidance. So sometimes your relationships can impact and you can become an avoidant or also anxious as well. Can you have some traits but not be completely narcissistic? Yes. So I talked about this earlier. That so one of the reasons why I don't know why this isn't talked about enough, or why this isn't talked about more. It's common knowledge in the mental health industry with therapists and narcissists, or at least it should be. So yes, you can have traits and not be completely narcissistic, and some of the reasons why you might have some traits and not be completely narcissistic is because you have deep-rooted insecurities. Also because you have unhealed trauma. You may have had some experiences from childhood or as an adult. One of the things that you have to understand is that unhealed trauma looks like narcissism. If that person can look like narcissism, doesn't look like it all the time. But you can get, stuck in some bad habits and some bad behavior, that definitely can mimic narcissism, if you're not careful. That's the reason why people should go to therapy. What if the narcissist is your mother? That's difficult. It definitely is difficult. It's definitely difficult when it's any family member, or anyone that's close to you, because then that forces you. So when I earlier, just a few minutes ago, when I said that it requires change on your end, it requires you sometimes to make difficult decisions about people who are not only close in your life, but also that there is a stigma, right? That you should always talk to your mother, you should always keep your mother close and things like that. When in reality, sometimes your mother, your father, your sister, your brother are the very ones who you might need to create distance with. Can two narcissists want the same supply? 100%. Right, so 100%. Not only can they want the same supply, but a lot of times it can be very competitive because they see you as like a good source of supply. So oftentimes, let me actually give a little bit more depth and detail in this situation. So can two narcissists want the same supply? Not only yes, but oftentimes when I'm working with someone, what happens is that they start to learn. Once they start to develop boundaries with the narcissist that they came to see me about, they start to realize that they have a bigger issue, right? That because they've lived a boundaryless life for a long period of time, that they have other narcissists or at least other people who are toxic or using them in their life that are kind of leeching onto them, so to speak. I always compare it to this. I always tell this story about, I told this on my podcast several years ago. But I remember, this is well over a decade ago, but I remember I had a bat in my house. And I have a friend who's an exterminator. I have a bat in my house, and I took care of it myself, right? So I took care of the bat, and I called my exterminator friend, making fun of him, and like, see, people don't need your services. They can just take care of it themselves, and this and that. Just being funny, just, giving him a hard time or whatever, right? And he laughed back. He laughed back at me, and he said, "Matt, if you have one bat, that means you have a bigger problem." And so he came and he did his whole exterminator thing, his examination thing. And what we found out is that in my attic, it was basically like the bat cave. I had a huge problem with bats in my house, and I had no idea. But it all started with just one bat. And so oftentimes when I work with them, they'll come to me about a romantic partner. Then we start going down this rabbit hole of, well, I'm starting to see this behavior in my mother. I'm starting to see it in my father. Or I see it, with a friend or a sister or a brother. Like, boss, this, that. And it's because you've been living your life in a way that's been very attractive. Someone who has some good things about them, some attractive things about them, but also lives a very boundaryless life. And so people who enjoy that type of behavior because they know that they can leech off of you, right, and use that to their advantage, most definitely will. Thank you very much for the follow. I appreciate it. I know how this behavior has came from my father. Yep. When I was searching for therapy, I couldn't find anyone who is knowledgeable on the subject of narcissists. It is very, very difficult. So speaking from personal experience, one of the things that happens is that do schools teach you about narcissism? Yes. But the problem is that it's very surface level. Right, very, very surface level, and it's really difficult to teach about some of this stuff without also simultaneously having some experience. I'm not saying it's impossible, but there's certain things like, for example, hoovering, right? That person, someone trying to win you back over, and things like that. That's very difficult to like teach in a book. We talked about hoovering last week. It's very difficult to teach people, if you haven't experienced it, that a narcissist will fake cancer, right? It goes beyond, it's like beyond reason, right? To think that someone would go to that length to make it seem like they are dying of cancer just to get you back, only to break up with you a few days or a few weeks later, just to make sure that the breakup is on their terms and not yours. That's not something you can really teach in a book, right? Unless you've experienced it, unless the other person has experienced it, because people will ask, like when I'm in a session with someone, people will ask, like, they'll say, like, this person sent me an email or a text telling me that they're in a horrific car accident. Like, internally, I'm feeling like this is a lie. But I also simultaneously feel bad if this is true. And more often than not, it's the lie. So some of these things like are, to make sure I vouch for my fellow therapists and things like that, is very difficult to, like, if someone doesn't have this knowledge and you go to your therapist and they don't have that experience and you say that to them, they might, and I work with a lot of people who are also in therapy, right? And so they need kind of an extra, they love their therapist, they've been there for, whatever, but they don't have that additional knowledge about narcissism. And oftentimes the therapist will say, like, well, just check on them and see, and this and that, and that couldn't be further from. That's the worst thing that you can do, right? You need to, and as harsh as that sounds, you need to let the professionals handle it, right? If they really were actually in an accident, then guess what? That means that the ambulance can take care of it. That means that the doctors can take care of it. That means that they have someone that is taking care of them. Whoever it is that they cheated on you can take care of it. That's very difficult for someone who struggles with codependency, because because you already you feel like you have to save the day with every single situation, right? And so that's a struggle. And also, here's the other issue that happens through this process, is that sometimes you end up shutting down, and then you get back into a new relationship, and then it's hard for you to become open again, where it is okay for you to do those things. It is okay for you to share and to be vulnerable and so I also see the other side of it where someone's trying to recover, someone's trying to date, they are with someone who's healthy and trustworthy and those sorts of things, and then it's difficult to turn that back on, so to speak. Ex-fiance came up to me to say sorry and tried to faint because I don't believe them. Yeah, that happens more. There's books on that where people will fake faint and things like that. Usually happens with narcissistic mothers who do the fake fainting, fake sick, those sorts of things. But it can happen with any of them. I've got to get back to work. Thank you for the insight. You are very, very welcome. My ex told me that he had cancer last night. Very, very common. More common than what people think. The worst scenario that I've ever seen is someone faked it for 5 years. So they used it to get the person back. Then once they were back, they faked it for another 5 years. Would you tell a narcissist that they are that? No. There's no point. They would likely gaslight you and make you feel like you're the narcissist. Thank you so much for the response. You're welcome. Done attract them, or do we tolerate? I'm not sure what you mean by done attract them or do we tolerate. Maybe you mean do we attract them? It's a little bit of both. So you're attractive. So we have a responsibility. Don't forget that narcissists are attracted to people just for the same reasons why everyone else is. Like, you look good, you have things going for you, things like that. So you have to understand that it's actually not that big of a deal attracting them, right? It's actually not that big of a deal being attracted to them either. That's not the issue. The issue is the second part that you're talking about in terms of toleration, right? In terms of attaching to them, right? And to be with them and to stay with them for a long period of time, to tolerate that behavior for long periods of time is really where the bigger issue is. But I work with people all the time who, when we're doing the work, like, I went on a date last night, but like I saw some things about them. I really actually think that they're narcissistic, or even 3 weeks in, I really actually think they're narcissistic. Why did I do this again? Who cares? It's been 3 weeks. Cut them off. Stop talking to them, right? At that point, it's actually easy to cut them off, right? And they might give you a little bit of pushback, but definitely not like when you're actually attached to them and actually in the relationship. But actually going on a date, actually being attracted or vice versa, not that big of a deal. It's the attachment that we have to be more mindful of. I know this for a fact. I've noticed it when I was a teenager. I think I might have missed another one of your point. I know this behavior has come from my father. Yep. So I'm working on ignoring the nasty banter, and it's hard. Yes. So I'm not sure if you share children with them, but I would definitely go no contact with them. I think he was trying to do that with the silent call. I got once a year, probably. So thank you guys very much. I am going to hop off. I will be back on tomorrow. I might hop on this evening. I'm not sure yet, but I definitely will be back on tomorrow, 9 a.m. Central. If you guys enjoy content like this, if you again enjoy lives like this, make sure you 9 a.m. Central. If you guys enjoy content like this, if you again enjoy lives like this, make sure you. Sorry, I got a phone call. Make sure you check in with me on 9 a.m. Central. We do this every day, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Central, so we can certainly talk about different things, different dynamics. If you want to work with me, if you're considering work with me, make sure you go up to the link in my bio and you fill out the application. Book a free consultation. We have a 20-minute consultation. We'll talk about what it's like for us to work together, see if it is something that would work out for the two of us. Also, make sure if you want to watch the replay of this live or any other lives, make sure that you check out my big red play button. I'm talking in code. That is my BlueTube channel. It rhymes with BlueTube. I post additional content over there, so check that out. Post the replays of these live and also post other content as well. You can also ask me questions over there. Send an email to justaskmatt@mattpfeiffercoaching.com. Again, that is justaskmatt@mattpfeiffercoaching.com. Keep the email 2 to 3 paragraphs max. Be very direct and to the point. of what your question actually is. If it's too long, if it's too lengthy, or if I don't understand what you're asking, I won't be able to answer it. So with all that being said, thank you guys very much, and I will talk to you tomorrow. You guys have a good one.